thank you for coming out. We appreciate you all. I wish I could see your faces better behind. I know you're there. My name is Candace Wood, and I am the director of the Homeownership Resource Center for Famicos Foundation, which is a local community development corporation. We're the largest and oldest CDC in Northeast Ohio. And we have a lot of social service programs, as well as we do community building by way of developing commercial spaces, as well as residential and affordable housing. And we also manage a portfolio of probably about, I think it's about 600 some odd units of multifamily housing as well, ranging from market rate rental units to senior living units, as well as affordable apartment living. And I'll let my counterpart introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Keith Davis, Senior Homeownership and Financial Counselor at Famicos Foundation. As Candace mentioned, Famicos Foundation is an organization that is rooted directly within the community, and it is a very much so a social enterprise, as it provides a lot of different resources directly with the community. And so with that said, today is another opportunity to get to know, of course, our organization, but also some of the many resources that we offer through our program, which is the Homeownership Resource Center.
And we have some flyers up here as well. Please, once we're finished with the presentation, please feel free to come up, take some information. We have information up here about the additional services that we offer through the Homeownership Resource Center. It's more than just home ownership. We offer assistance with financial coaching, credit building and restoration, as well as foreclosure prevention, rental counseling. And we also have been in the throes of the urgent need over the past 2.5 years, which has been emergency rental assistance and utility assistance and homelessness prevention. So please feel free to reach out to us. We have a flyer up here that talks about those services, as well as we have our thriving VITA tax program. Famicos has been one of the top producer of tax returns over the past several years. So we do a lot with the small staff, which is kind of the thing that nonprofits do, right? So again, we invite you to take the information. We're always looking for volunteers as well. So if you have a background in tax preparation, if you know someone who does and they want to, provide their service as a community service, the help will be much appreciated. All right, so I'll get started. So we handed out the pre-training survey. So the purpose of that is just to kind of see where you are in your understanding or your, comfort level with debt management, right? We know that's a huge part of adulting, right? It's something that we don't necessarily, we're not officially or formally taught as we're, growing up in our homes. We kind of learn those skills by way of the habits and the environment, the habits of our parents or whoever our primary caregivers are, right? Our family members and our environment. And then we're sent out, we're around 18 years of age, and we're expected to get it done, right? So, we've all made mistakes, had triumphs, had everything come crashing down, had to build everything back up, and that's a part of it. So we hope that today the information that we share with you is really debt management. Really, financial education as a whole is such a vast topic that we don't expect for you to get it all today. We don't expect for you to understand all the terminology and put all the, the pieces of the puzzle together. That's kind of what our role is as financial coaches as well, is that we do, additional workshops for pinpointed, subjects like subtopics of the overall debt management topic, as well as one-on-one counseling where we will walk with you as a coach through your journey, right? It's kind of like going to the doctor. We meet with you, we assess, where you are, what are the symptoms, and we come up with a plan together of what your goals are and what are the ills, right, that need to be addressed to get you on a healthy path with your finances. All of our services are confidential, okay? So again, we invite you to reach out to us and engage, and we'll reach out to you as well as a follow-up, okay? So the presentation today was created by Credit Builders Alliance and is licensed with permission for our use today. CBA is an innovative nonprofit social enterprise dedicated to building the capacity of a diverse network of over 550 nonprofits across the country. CBA supports organizations in moving people from poverty to prosperity through credit building. All of CBA's services are connected to its core philosophy that a good credit file is essential to achieving and maintaining financial stability. Ultimately, CBA believes that credit building is the cornerstone of financial health. All right, so we'll go into Credit Building 101. So welcome to our presentation today. Our rules will be for our engagement today. We want to make sure that we maintain confidentiality because, our financial information or topics related to our finances, we hold near and dear to the heart, right? We want to keep them confidential. Ask for clarification when needed, and we want to try to stay on topic as much as possible. Again, financial education is such a vast topic that we could easily go down the rabbit hole, right? So we'll try to get back on topic as much as possible. To help us move through the presentation, it would be helpful if you want to jot your questions down on the note sheet that I handed out, and then that way we can kind of keep it moving. There may be something that you write down that we may be, come to that topic later in the presentation where we may actually answer your question, okay? But we definitely want to make sure that we get to everyone's questions before the full conclusion of the presentation. All right. So with that pre-test that I gave you, can I get some volunteers just to kind of give me a few words of what do you think about when you think about credit? Anyone? Yeah.
Leverage.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. Anyone else? Has your exposure to the idea of credit, thinking about when you were growing up in your household, was there a negative connotation with the use of credit? Like you don't want to get in, you don't want to get credit cards, you want to stay away from that. You want to pay cash as much as possible, right? Okay. All right, we're going to try to kind of break that up today. We're going to give you a different perspective on that follows along the thought of leverage, okay? So perceptions of credit can be both positive and negative. And we want to hear, like I said, what you think and what your experience has been with credit thus far, okay? So, let's see.
Yep.
And we want to keep in mind that everyone's credit journey is different, right? As we've each had a different combination of experiences, education, and access to credit products that have brought us to where we are today. Would you all agree that we've all had our road to where we are today has been vastly different, right? Though we all kind of started with that same idea of once you get to be an adult, you come of age, then you start building credit. But we've all done it in different ways, be it good or bad, right? That has gotten us here today. Sometimes credit can be a hard topic to discuss, and we want to acknowledge that in this course. We'll talk a lot about credit reports and credit scores. While scores are certainly more important, we're still more than our credit score. Regardless of where you started from, with the tools and information we'll go through today, we hope you will leave with a better understanding and a slightly different viewpoint about credit. All right, so this slide kind of shows you some definitions of credit, right? Credo, trust. Value and worth, decade, a sum of money that is owed or due. Something owed. So that's usually the definition that we think of when we think of credit, a debt, something that's owed. We don't usually think of it more in a positive manner where there's trust built into that. So the idea behind credit is that when someone is extending you credit, they're extending you a favor of trust, right? It's a relationship. And it's also worth and value in credit. Right, the word credit comes from the Latin word credo, creed or credit, which means trust, value, and worth. Credit is a tool. As with all tools, proper knowledge and management is key to success. At its core, credit allows you to buy something now and pay for it later. Debt, on the other hand, is a liability, so it has kind of more of a negative connotation. The word debt refers to what is owed to others, while credit and debt are not synonymous. For many of us, using too much credit can become a negative practice. Why do we speak about credit building? Credit building is important to us because it allows us to gain access to things that we may not normally be able to access within our normal means or income, right? Again, it gives us leverage. You can get something today, pay for it tomorrow that you may not have been able to access, right? You can leverage credit when it comes to looking at, borrowing funds to do something, say for instance, to purchase a home, right? Many of us don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in our bank accounts that's readily accessible to purchase a home. But credit allows us that leverage to be able to access that asset and pay for it over time, right? It also allows us, sometimes individuals will access, credit or lines of credit, and they may take those funds and leverage it and invest it in some other vehicle, investment vehicle, where they're able to make more of a return on that borrowed money than what they're paying for the money, right? So there are some positive things that we do with credit. It also allows you to pay less for things in the long run, and it improves your options for the things that you can have access to. There's financial products. You have rental housing, utilities, cell phone plans, insurance products, and things of that nature. Good credit equals access to high-quality financial products. Most of us require access to credit to weather economic shocks, such as unexpected job loss, cars that break down, or sometimes just a smooth income and expense fluctuations throughout the month. Without access to credit, many people depend on predatory lenders and may fall into a cycle of over-indebtedness. Having a good credit history helps us to find more affordable financial products. A good credit score can help you to pay for something today and have access to it in the future. Good credit also helps us to manage emergencies, reduce expenses, achieve your goals. So when we look at building credit, saving money, it leads to financial stability and financial security. Some people have income, savings, and assets, or at least a family or social safety net to fall back on to weather financial challenges. Most of us do not. Most of us at some point in our lives will require access to small dollar credit, like a credit card to weather economic shocks or job loss, or reduction in hours, or an unexpected but planned, and helps us plan for emergencies. Similar reporting agencies. Businesses that compile credit information into reports used by lenders, other businesses, and consumers. Credit reporting agencies do not make credit decisions. This is why that it's all bit free for your Zoom and experience. They're not actually the ones that are making the decisions. They're just holding your income, and they're holding your information to get that information out to the actual creditors, right?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
And so, just generally, when we think about, of course, those three credit reporting agencies, just in general, it's kind of like your financial report card, right? They want to know how you're doing, how you're managing, your expenses, how you're managing, in particular, the things that they're going to report. And so when we're talking about, of course, handling debt, that relationship that you have, of course, with managing your money is so important, because they're going to tell if you've been good or if you've been bad. So that's why it's so important, especially in terms of what's being reported, to have that full understanding.
Yeah, and so with that, there's this misconception sometimes where we focus on the score, right? What do I need? What score do I need? You need about 660, to be able to buy a house, right? Oh, you want to get your scores up into, 720. If you get above 800, you're good. That's only a part of the picture, right? It's that credit report also. So though you may have an awesome credit score where it pretty much speaks to what history shows up or what information is actually on that report, what's on the report is equally as important as that score, right? You could have a score that's, in the 700 range, and you may have a collection account. But if we just focus on the score and we never really review our credit report to really see what information is being reported, and even more importantly for accuracy, we want to make sure that things that are on our report are accurate, right? That's the duty of the credit reporting agencies. They have a duty to you as a consumer to report 100% accurate information, right? And so when someone pulls your credit, they're not only looking at that score, that's just kind of one marker, but they're going to review the history. So you absolutely want to make sure that, you take some time and that you're reviewing your reports, whether you're using, mobile apps to keep track of your report. And you always want to remember that there's 3 scores, okay? And what we see oftentimes is that folks will use the free apps or the free reporting services, or your bank may offer you credit monitoring, or your credit card may offer credit monitoring, where you can go in and actually see where your score is. You can see, a report and all that. But you want to remember that normally, and when I say this, those of you that don't pay attention to it, you're going to say, oh man, I never realized that. But if you look at those free apps, you're going to realize that they're only going to report 2 scores, maybe 1, right? Normally, the 2 reporting agencies that report to those free tools are going to be Equifax and TransUnion, okay? So make sure you check that. If you haven't ever looked at it or downloaded any of, say, a Credit Karma, and I don't know if that's a commercial, I got to do branding and, but that's a popular one, right? Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, those give you Equifax and TransUnion, okay? You don't want to leave that third one out there just hanging out by itself, because you never know. Though Equifax and TransUnion may look okay, you want to know what's going on that third report, which will be your Experian report. And Experian is not going to report on any of those third-party free service apps. You have to get the Experian app and download that, so they only report their scores directly, okay? So make sure you do that so that you have all 3 of your scores and you're monitoring all 3. Okay. All right, and in addition to the 3 major credit reporting agencies that we know about, you have so many different credit profiles out there. You know, we hear the company LexisNexis, that's one. That gives you a credit profile. And then, so there's a lot of others.
Yeah, so you have, you have also, which a lot of times that are utilized on websites such as Credit Karma, you have companies that utilize the Vantage Score, for instance. Vantage Score is utilized a lot of times for Credit Karma. Oldest score is the FICO score model. They've been utilizing that probably for the longest time period because it was created back in 1989. So it has a longer history of, approval rates as well. And so, when you see that, the one thing to keep in mind is that while, certain websites are very useful in knowing the information that's contained on your reports, just keep in mind that sometimes it is to be utilized as a tool. And so when Candace mentions looking at all 3 of your credit reporting scores, looking at all 3 of your reports, it's important because generally you'll find that if you have a smaller amount of debt, like a medical bill, for instance, that goes into collections, it's not going to report on all 3 of the credit reporting agencies. It's only going to report on one. Reason being is because of the fact that they have to pay a fee. So if you think about it from the standpoint of a smaller company, they're not going to pay all 3 of them. They're only going to pay one. So by looking at all of the information, you're further ensuring that you're reducing the amount of debt that you have because you know what's on your reports.
Absolutely. And even with that too, people just want to it's so you've got these models, like I said, the Vantage Score or FICO, and all lenders, they use all these different models, right? And the main thing that you can do is just making sure that you're doing the things that help to maintain your credit, right? You're never gonna hit the mark exactly, right? You can have your credit pulled in the morning, another, lender could pull you in the afternoon and the scores will be different. They won't be vastly different, but the scores are not going to pinpoint exactly the same. It just depends on the model that they're utilizing to calculate the score that they want to pull, right? So all we can do is say, like on those free services, is just kind of keep a gauge on it. So it's just that, to monitor, right? Because you'll never be able to manipulate, your score or say, okay, all right, the app says I had a 680. Let me go ahead and stop the car. And then the car company will pull your score at 620. And you're like, why is that so different? Well, it's just because the models that you're looking at from a consumer side are different than what they're seeing, from the creditor side. Okay? So car loan companies, they pull a different model than, say, a mortgage company, to a bank as you can like personal bond, they're all going to be different. Okay. All right. So again, you got your credit history, which is the itemization, right? So all of the nooks and crannies and the breadcrumbs, right, to how you got to whatever the score is or the 3 scores that you have at any particular given time, right? It's just a summary, it's a snapshot of what's going on with your credit at that time, right? And then the credit score is really a summary of the risk that a creditor would take with you at that given moment in time. Again, you could look at your score throughout the day and it may fluctuate, right? You could look at it beginning of the month, mid-month, end of the month, and it's gonna be different. Now, are there some, tips and things that you can do? Absolutely, right? There are some things that you can do to kind of manage where your scores are, what they look like, and that type of thing. We're not gonna dive deep, and that's a whole other, master class on the tips and tricks and how you do those things. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is take a look at where's the sheet?
The pre.
No, the circle.
Oh, the FICO.
Right.
Might be one in here as well. See. So everyone should probably have this sheet in their folder. By chance, do you see it? This one? Oh yeah, you got it already out. Look at that. Look, ready to go. Got it. So if you notice on this sheet, and in terms of the meters, it mentions the biggest thing that's on here, 35%. What is that based on? Payment history. Look at that, payment history, because nobody wants to be paid late, right? At least that's my thought. I don't like to be paid late. So, that's why it's kind of the number one thing. It's based on how we are handling and managing our money. Here's a question. It's just a general rhetorical question for everyone just to think about. Would you let somebody borrow money if they had like a history of paying people late? If it was that one person, that one uncle or one individual in your family that's known for paying people late, you would kind of look at them a little different, right? If they asked you for money. So, similarly, of course, when we're looking at credit reports, especially with payment history, that's why it makes so much of an impact in how you're managing things. So 35% is based on that. But then also, if you notice, the other thing is that 30% is based on the amounts that are owed, right? So that is, once again, how you're managing those current loans that you currently have, those current things that we're reporting directly on your credit report. So what this is telling us is that 65% of your score, more than half of your score, is based on how you are paying as well as how you're managing that debt. So we can see that makes a big impact. But now if we look at the next thing, what's under 15%? It's a credit what? Credit mix or credit with an H? Look, see, I was giving y'all the answer. Look, so credit history. Credit mix is a good one though too. So credit history. So the long time period of you continually to do things and have good habits on your report is going to make the biggest impact. So what this is telling you is that the way that you're managing your debt, the way that you're paying your debt over a longer time period is going to make your reputation even better, especially based on when the creditors look at you. Because basically that's what is basically happening is that when they get a credit report, generally they're saying, okay, well, everything seems to be fine. They got money for a down payment and so forth. Okay, well, let's just see if they're paying everybody else. If they see something that's showing that they don't have a history of paying people back on time, then generally it makes it pretty simple, right? They're not going to let you borrow money, but if they do let you borrow money, then the terms are going to be outrageous. The interest is going to be super high because they want to make sure that they want you to pay plus the interest. So when we look at these meters, this is kind of one of the reasons why it's so important in terms of the way that we're managing, of course, the current credit that we have. Now, credit mix, it does make an impact on your report because generally on most credit profiles, the average person kind of has a mix of different things. They have installments, which oftentimes are auto loans, for example. They also have credit cards. And then, typically you may mix it in with a college loan, or perhaps you may mix it in with a housing loan. So those are typically kind of the diverse things that you will see on the credit report. And typically that makes the biggest impact on your report. And then also here it makes mention that 10% is based on new credit. So of course, when that new credit begins to report on your credit report, it will begin to build your score. But of course, those other factors that we made mention of, that's only after you start establishing that payment history, you continue to make payments on time. Now, I'm not gonna stay on this topic too much, but it's one key factor, right? In order to make a payment on time, you gotta know what? In order to make a payment on time, you gotta know what?
When the statement is due.
When it's due, right? So that's gonna be the first thing that, of course, if we know when the bill is due, and then also, perhaps at another time, we'll talk about a couple of other tips around that. But those are just a couple of different reminders that we wanna keep in mind regarding that. And so as we look here, we have, of course, our installment loan. And the installment loan is simple. It's a fixed loan amount with a lump sum disbursement. So you get that lump sum, but then also what begins to happen, such as with auto loans, you begin to make those monthly payments. Again, how you're handling those payments is going to be the most important part. And of course, first and foremost, knowing when it's due is the number one thing that's going to help with that. And so if we look at our next slide, we have, of course, this is typically when our loan begins, and that's when, of course, the installment loan begins to activate. But then, of course, when that repayment ends, notice that it says that the loan closes. So when that loan closes, or let's just say, for example, since we've been talking about auto, if you have an auto loan and you paid it off, then at that point, that relationship stops. It closes, it stops reporting on your report. So as a result of that, typically what happens to most individuals after they pay off an auto loan, while it is good and of course in paying off debt, sometimes you'll see a dip in your credit score because you lost someone who is basically vouching for you every single month. So because of the fact that that repayment ended, that account will close and it won't be active anymore. So if we look at our next slide, of course, we see a revolving credit. So here it says that it's open-ended. It's a monthly payment that's based on the revolving balance. And so when we think about revolving, easiest way to look at it is that it's just like a revolving door, right? It continues to stay open. But of course, especially for revolving credit, it is so important the way that you handle it, because typically with most revolving credit, it does report to all three of your credit reporting agencies. The other thing is that it is probably the biggest way that an individual who is building credit will be able to successfully do that. But when we're thinking about revolving credit, the other reason why it's such a big factor is because typically revolving credit has the longest history, because that's always going to stay with you, especially based on how you're handling it. Now, if you're not paying on time or if you're not using it, then of course that account will close as a result of that. So, that's just something that we want to keep in mind about this particular credit product. So, if we notice here, we see the differences between an installment debt, revolving credit, and the number one thing is what you see at the top. It says successfully managing your credit accounts. So how you handle those accounts is really going to be the most important thing. Of course, with an installment, you note that it ensures that extra payments are allocated correctly to the principal and interest. Of course, a prepayment may reduce those costs. But then, if you notice at the end, it says that once you paid it out, you will no longer be able to build your credit as a result of that. Revolving, that's a little bit different. It helps us to appreciate that you pay the balance full each month, keep the balances low, avoid the minimum payment trap, and then keep open if possible. So why that's so important is because, let's just say, for instance, if you had an installment and you had a credit card and you started both of them at the same time, the one thing that's going to happen is that revolving line of credit is going to continue to push your score up, while the installment, you're going to see a reduction in your score because you're no longer benefiting from having that relationship. So generally, that's kind of a good way to think about that difference in terms of an installment as well as a revolving credit. Now, let's get into a good credit that will happen if you open an account, at least one credit product, if you use a credit card and then you keep the balance low, but also if you pay your creditors on time each month. And the easiest way to do that is knowing when the due date. So we know what the due date, and it's a simple thing, but I make mention of that because it's so important, because a lot of times what could happen is that, let's say if the due date that a credit card company gives you is not a date that kind of falls in the way that you pay your monthly bills. Well, most credit card companies, they will allow you to change that date. So that's kind of why when we talk about how we're managing our debt, it's so important to kind of spend that time and have a good relationship with your money. So understanding that money flow every single month is going to help with that. Because if you say, for instance, if there are certain bills that you tend to pay in the first half of the month, if you have a credit card bill due that time period, is that something that you can pay? Or maybe it's in the lower half of the month that you can handle it. It's just something for us to think about. By handling it that way, it allows us to kind of be better with our payment history rather. So now at this time, we're going to talk a little bit more about dealing with debt. And certainly when we think about dealing with debt, it's so important.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's so important, especially when, debt could come in a lot of different ways. But the thing is how we manage debt. It helps us to make decisions about the debt as well as with the credit building in mind. So here's a couple of different things that we want to keep in mind. There's a couple of different ways that we've been able to develop and helpful strategies in doing so. One makes mention that we can tackle the low-hanging fruit. So what that means is that's kind of like the snowball effect, right? If a lot of times, if we're looking at our own personal debt, instantly we want to just pay everything off. And trust and believe, if I had some type of magic wand where I could just do like that and all your debt would be paid off, I would do it. But here it makes mention that you want to tackle the small fruit. You want to pay off the things that you know that you can pay off. But here's the thing to keep in mind about that. You'll be able to know that based on the way that you're managing your debt. If you can look at how your monthly expenses are, and this is something we kind of alluded to in one of our other sessions in Money Talks, we have money that's left over after we paid all of our individual expenses, and that's basically showing us how we can pay that off. So here it makes mention that we want to tackle the small hanging fruit, but the other reason why that's so important is because it does build momentum for us. So we're currently dealing with a lot of debt. If we tackle first the small debt, then guess what? That is going to report good on our report. That's going to have an impact on us. And then that's going to allow us to kind of build a stronger foundation going forward. So here it makes mention of disputing errors and inaccuracies. So certainly this is one way that we could handle that small fruit, catching up on past due accounts, reduce balance. Every little bit helps. And then here it makes mention prioritize. So we want to keep the current accounts current, prevent further harm, and then consider the size of the debts and the interest costs. Now, here's one thing that we want to keep in mind. This is one of the things that we do in one-on-one coaching sessions. And so we're working with individuals and we're trying to help them and prioritize which debts would be the best in terms of building their credit. One of the things we're trying to help them determine is what's going to be the best strategy for them to reach their milestone. So how we prioritize that is going to be so important. But it starts off with our foundation, understanding what monies we have available to handle those debts. Now here it makes mention of navigating competing priorities. So here it states bringing older accounts current instead of opening new credit accounts when possible, keep older revolving credits open and active, and then balance credit building while still addressing collection accounts. So what that's stating is that when you're handling, of course, your debt, you want to look at the collection accounts that you could pay off, not tomorrow, but today. See, by handling those collection accounts while still keeping those other accounts current, it's going to be so important in terms of building up your score. Now, a lot of times, of course, for certain individuals, it's not the easiest thing. And a lot of times, that's why making this a priority is going to be the most important thing. Because the one thing that you want to keep in mind in terms of collection accounts is, of course, the options that are available in paying those off as well. So here it talks a little bit more about when does information fall off your credit report. So I know that a lot of times, especially when we are all dealing with collection accounts and debts, there seems to always be kind of a consensus about when information falls off your report. And for certain people, they may even go ahead and say that, hey, listen, I don't have to deal with this debt because after a certain period, it's going to fall off and I'll never have to deal with it. Well, here this kind of gives a little bit more of a breakdown and understanding regarding this. So open accounts, of course, in good standing, you want to keep those open as much as possible because that's going to continue to build up your score. Closed accounts in good standing, that's going to report on your credit report for 10 years. Late as well as missed payments, that's going to be 7 years from the date of the first delinquency. Charge-offs or collections, that's going to be, again, 7 days from the date of the first delinquency. Bankruptcies, here it makes mention for Chapter 7, 10 years. For Chapter 13, that's going to be 7 years. Foreclosures, 7 years. And then, of course, inquiries, 2 years that it's going to report on your credit report. Now, this is one thing that we want to keep in mind when we're considering time periods. And we can say this because we're in the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio probably is one of the more creditor-friendly states that they have. And they probably have one of the longest statute of limitations. So just think of it this way. If you know that you have existing debt and it may fall off your report, it does not take you out of the responsibility. Just a quick and short story. I worked with someone before and I was helping them buy a home, and they were aware of the fact that they had some debt. And we talked about it, and I made mention that they should pay off that debt. And they went ahead, they purchased the house, but they didn't pay off the debt because they said, hey, it wasn't reported. Well, next thing you know, they faced a judgment lien because of the fact that they didn't pay that debt. So the thing is that just look at it this way, especially in Ohio. Even if you're thinking that you're getting out of not paying that debt, eventually it's going to come and it'll impact you. So here, of course, we have a couple of discussion questions, right?
Yep, we got surprises.
Okay, we got surprises.
Friendly competition.
Okay, all right. I know this is right after lunch too, for a lot of people. So, which approach to debt reduction will generally save you the most money? What do you think? Said A. Okay. B. Okay, we got a B. We got an A. We got a B.
How many people vote A?
Got 2 for A. Oh, 3 for A.
3 for A. How many vote for B?
Okay.
All right, and the C?
Okay. What about D? No D's? Okay. All right. And the survey says B. Look at that. All right, so what do you... That's right.
I just said, why should you pay off those lowest? You put the rest. Right. I just said, what to pay out lowest. Put that toward the
Baby.
You could pay it towards the next debt once you pay it off.
you'll be say more, right?
Well, I mean, so this is kind of a trick question, I'll say that much, because, you know, a lot of that is going to be based on what the interest rate is too.
Okay.
So that's the key of it. You know, it could be, if it's a higher interest rate and you're able to take care of that, that's going to, eventually help you out a little bit more. But in particular, that's why when you look at your profile, your credit profile, going over that information as you continue to make that strategy is going to be so important. So, yeah, but I am 100% a number one fan of that method. I've utilized that method for a lot of people that we've worked with, so.
Yeah, and paying up the smallest debt first, small wins, right? It keeps us motivated
Oh, yeah.
and feeling encouraged in our journey with tackling our debt. So, that's another benefit of utilizing that snowball method.
All right. So, steps to paying off debt. So here it makes mention that the number one thing is that you want to assess your budget or spending plan, if you will. Inventory of your debts. Number 3, you want to make a plan and pay more than the minimum. Apply a surplus money to high priority debts. And then, of course, 5, pay off debts one by one. So would you like to do the case study? Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so this case study here, Ramona has $8,700 in debt on 3 credit cards. She budgeted $400 towards debt payments each month. Ramona has calculated her options and determined that the debt avalanche method will save her the most, will save her almost $400 compared to the other method. Okay? So let's see, let's look at the chart. So we've got the 3 accounts, right? The retail card, ABC bank card, and big bank credit card. Her projected payoff date, 11 months for the first card, 26 months, and 31 months respectively. So payment schedule, she's got $400 budgeted to go towards her debts every month. So that means that she's paying above and beyond what her minimum payments are each month, right? So we see that the minimum payment here for the first card, the retail card, is $35, $25 for the second, and $50 for the third. So the monthly payment, she's doing $325 on the first card. The one's got the balance of $2,900. So she's really, being aggressive, right, with tackling that. And you notice that she's doing the minimum payments on the other 2, right? Because she's putting her money where it's going to make the biggest impact with that goal of paying that debt off quickly, right? Then you see month 1 through 9, she's doing the $325 on that first debt. And then once she gets to month 10, she makes that last payment of $310.35. So month 11, she's paid off. So now she takes that money and she moves it over to the next card for months 11 through 20. So now the surplus, you see she put a little bit more on month 10 on that second debt, and then going into months 11 through 20, she's putting $350 towards that debt to get it paid off. In the 21st month, she gets down to $184.28 is the balance. So for that same $325 that she was putting towards it, the surplus goes over to that third card, right? So now we're doing $215.72. So that's the surplus plus her $50 minimum payment on that card. So that's the $215.72 for that month. So the other 2 cards are paid off by this point, right? So she's winning. She's happy. She's celebrating, feeling good. But what we're not going to do, we're not going to close the first 2 cards. Mm-hmm. And that's often something that we get into because we feel like, well, I made that last payment, I paid it off. Now I don't want to get raised up anymore. I'm going to go ahead and pay. I'm going to close it. Don't close it. Cut the card up if you don't want to use it anymore. Put it in a lockbox. Put it in a safe place. But allow that card to continue to have life, because that life is now very positive. You're well below that 30% utilization mark. And it's only going to help build up your score, right? If you close it, you're going to shut it off. It's no longer going to help your credit score. it'll show on the history when someone reviews the report, and they'll see, oh, okay, she had, or he or she had, 5 really good accounts, payments made on time, accounted for, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But once you pay it off, it's not helping with any of those factors anymore. Excuse me. So you're going to lose those points. So then when we get to that third card there, you see we're paying months 22 through 26. We're addressing it real aggressively, $400 a month. And we get to month 27, so a little bit over 2 years, she's debt free, right? So it's a process. And you just have to, you stick to it. You're going to have some ups and downs with it, but you just get back, on track and start addressing it again. And with this, when you couple that with having a monthly spending plan where you're identifying where every dollar goes, right? No dollar should be left out there just free. There's no free money, right? So if you do, it's called a zero-based budget. So if you put that into practice, you'll always have little funds, little accounts, up under your main bank account where okay, I've got this much money in my emergency savings. I've got this much money in my vacation savings. I've got this much in here for car repair, X number of dollars to, do holidays or to purchase things for the family, right? That way it takes some of that instability and feelings of distress out of your monthly spending. Because when the emergency happens, emergencies aren't so big anymore because you've already controlled those dollars and identified what those dollars should go towards in advance.
So here's a couple of different resources that are available that can help, of course, with creating your own debt payoff plan, for instance. And so as we look at the different websites, keep in mind that these are just resources that are available to provide you with different strategies. There are also other resources that are available as well through the FTC.gov, as well as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that make, of course, managing debt very useful from that standpoint as well.
That's a question. So I want to do just a knowledge check question. Are the credit reporting agencies affiliated, are they government agencies?
Still not gonna.
They are for-profit entities that make money by selling your data.
They threw a trick question in there, huh? All right. So here it makes mention that that this is just the impact of collection accounts directly on your credit report and how it affects your scores. Negative impact, new unpaid collection accounts, potential for negative impact, older unpaid or settled collection accounts, reduced potential for negative impact, old paid and unpaid collection accounts. So if you're looking here, you notice that the new ones have the biggest impact on your report. And that's because typically, a lot of times what it represents that this was some more unpaid debt that had to be sent directly over to a collection account. So generally what could happen is that you could be, for a period of time, you could be moving in the right direction in terms of your score, but instantly when something falls directly in collections and it impacts your score, it could instantly take the score down 20, 30 points at a time as a result of that. So here's a couple of different strategies around collection accounts and paying them off. And for everyone, I'm certain that some of these different strategies, they're not anything new. But here's a couple of different ways. Now, here it makes mention to pay in full. Most beneficial for credit score, costs more money. Here it also mentions settle, costs less money, forgiven amount may be taxed. And then payment plans. And with payment plans, it mentions to exercise caution. But keep in mind too, with a payment plan, especially when it's something that's in collections, it's not going to have the biggest impact until it's actually paid off. Now, here's something just to think about, and this is just kind of goes back into a little bit of money management from that standpoint. A lot of times, especially with dealing with certain collection accounts, individuals may say that, hey, listen, I could pay this debt off if I had a payment plan. Well, here's the thing. If your creditor isn't providing you with a payment plan, could you save until you had the amount and then pay it? So it's just a couple of different things that we want to think about, especially in terms of strategies and taking care of and handling debt effectively.
And kind of along that same practice, if you set yourself up on essentially the same payment plan that a creditor may or may not be willing to set you up on, cash is always still king.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So once you get to a point where you've saved, a certain percentage of those funds, or even you save the whole amount where you could potentially just pay the whole debt off, you still have the option to then drop down to the settlement option. Right? Because now you've got the cash and you can negotiate a payoff with that creditor, maybe for a lesser amount. They may be willing to take it because if you're willing to pay cash right then and there, they may be open to accepting it.
Yeah, and some settlement companies, they will allow you to not only settle the debt, but they're willing to even remove the debt off your report as a result of paying that debt at that time. So,
and it's called a pay for delete letter. You can request that before you even make the payment.
So we have, of course, as consumers, particular rights that are available for us, especially when we deal with creditors. And sometimes even just knowing those things are really important, especially when we enter those conversations. So here this kind of gives us a better understanding, especially in terms of how we work with creditors. And so the first thing it makes mention of is that calling before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m., they can be reported for that. Here, contacting you at work, if you told them verbally or in writing that your employer does not permit them to contact you, contacting a third party about you for any reason other than getting your contact information. Here it also makes mention harassing or abusing you or anyone else about you, lying about the amount that you have. Using deceptive methods to collect a debt from you. So if that's the case, I believe it's the FTC.
They got the website right there at the bottom.
So yeah, it's ftc.gov that you could report them to. So, and here's an important thing to keep in mind about that, because especially around this time period, because we're kind of in a tax season, there are a lot of different calls and scams that you'll get, in particular about your own personal debt or even sometimes taxation. It's important to report those calls directly to the ftc.gov. Reason being is because a lot of times they can't act unless there's enough people that are reporting the same issue. So for instance, if there's a robocall and somebody's getting the same robocall, well, if only one person reports that robocall, they're not going to do anything. But if there's a lot of people reporting that, then that's going to make the FTC to step in and, of course, work on that behalf of those consumers.
And then I just want to kind of reiterate a point that Keith made earlier, is that, you do have rights. You have rights as a consumer. You have rights related to your credit and accuracy of how information is being reported about you, because that affects your financial standing, right? That affects you. And so they have a duty to make sure the credit reporting agencies that the information is being reported is accurate. And you've got access to federal bureaus, federal agencies that are there to support you. And that was kind of why I asked that question earlier, if whether or not the 3 credit reporting agencies, are they agencies? When we think of agencies, we think of like the government. They're not governmental agencies, they're for-profit companies. And you've got the Federal Trade Commission. And you've also got, like Keith mentioned earlier, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So CFPB. Those are the 2 main agencies that have lots of educational information and materials out there. They have lots of information about, credit reporting, accuracy and inaccuracy. How do you, report, abusive practices and things like that. So please, I urge you guys, just go out and take a look at those sites and see, the wide range of information that's out there, to help support you. And if you make a complaint, you can make a complaint to CFPB. You don't have to know specifically where it's supposed to go. If you make a complaint to CFPB, they will make sure that anything that is supposed to go to the Federal Trade Commission, they will send that information over for you. And then you'll get correspondence from, whichever agency is handling your complaint or concern.
Yeah, CFPB, they take lawsuits very seriously. Reason why I know is because I remember sometime in the past, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, I received a letter from the CFPB about a lawsuit. And I was like, what is this? I was like, this is probably, so I tore it up. They sent me another letter, tore it up. They ended up calling me and they said, no, this is a lawsuit against this agency. We're sending out everyone a disbursement because of it. Sure enough, sent it in, they issued me a check. So it's a real thing. And I only make mention of that because, a lot of times when we think about agencies such as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, oftentimes we may think that, well, it's not going to impact me in any way. It's good information, but no, they will. So it's just important for us to keep in mind. Now, speaking about the CFPB, it makes mention, and there's a lot of great information about this particular topic, credit repair. Now, of course, as an agency, nonprofit organization, through this program, we don't utilize the word credit repair. Reason being is because generally there have been recently a lot of lawsuits as well as scams surrounded around credit repair. And so when we think about this, he mentions that this is anyone who promises changes, number of points, specific time span, anyone who charges upfront services without promising anything, anyone who doesn't inform you of their rights, and then anyone who asks you to misrepresent your information on the credit bureaus. So, for instance, when you think about credit repair agencies, perhaps you've seen them, you've heard them on the radio. You may know of some. You may even see some of them on YouTube. And, of course, initially when we look at it, it seems pretty, tempting. But here's the thing to keep in mind, when we meet with individuals on a one-on-one basis, we only stick with factual information. So here's something to keep in mind. Would you go to a doctor if you were sick or if you were ill and that doctor promised you excellent health the next following day? You would say that, all right, take care. You would say that something is wrong, right? With that doctor, what is the doctor going to do? If you're sick, or if you're hurt, they're going to prescribe different medications so that your health can get better gradually, right? But it's never a promise of overnight success. So, generally when we meet with people, we stick with factual information because that's what's helpful to keep in mind regarding that. So there's a couple of things that you want to remember. Remember that you have the right to receive a copy of your credit report each and every year. So here's just something to think of, with no answers, just something to think of rhetorically. Have you took advantage of this? Have you took advantage of getting your annual credit report? You see, this is something that's available for us. Be informed if you have been denied for a loan or received an unfavorable terms. because of negative information on your credit report. If you've been denied a loan, they will send you out a letter, and that letter allows you to get a free credit report just to find out exactly what potentially it was. Now, here's something to keep in mind, and I was really mad about this too, so I'm gonna say it. I got some furniture, and they gave me an option of a credit card or a loan, and I decided to go without the credit card and loan, and they sent me a denial letter. I said, well, no, I wasn't denied. I said I just wanted this option. So sometimes you may even see, sometimes those different options as well, just because of the fact that you said that you denied it. They'll still send you that letter, and just so that you'll have that opportunity to get your report. Here it mentions you can dispute the information that you believe that's incorrect, and then you can receive a new free copy of your credit report if you have disputed something successfully, just to show that update.
And keep in mind too that with the free apps where you can monitor your credit, I also, encourage you, go to the credit bureau sites directly, right? Go visit transunion.com and visit, Equifax and set up a profile. And it's free. Okay, some of them you have to go through the dispute section to actually get signed up to get the free profile. But once you do that, that gives you direct information from that credit reporting agency too, rather than it being filtered through that third party, like a Credit Karma or something like that. And also because after COVID, I believe it's TransUnion, you can look at your credit report, get a free report like every day.
Yeah, that was, so actually,
They have increased the frequency of allowing folks to have access to the reports because there's so many, misrepresentations and accurate information being reported. It's just, things have just been haywire.
Yeah, you're right.
Data breaches and, all that.
So, let's see. Okay, so
This is reaffirming.
So this reaffirms, of course, your rights. And then, of course, this is that wonderful website I made mention of, www.annualcreditreport.com, where you can, of course, take a look at your report. So this is just kind of giving you just a walkthrough of how you get your report. So when you go online to get your report, it's really 3 different methods to get it. One, you can mail a letter, you can call, or you can go online. This kind of explains the online method. So if you go online, you input your personal information, and then it's just going to ask you a couple of questions. These are security questions that are based directly on your information. They're all multiple choice, but it is to prove that you are in fact the person, the consumer, who is getting their credit report. Once you validate that, that will provide you with access. If you don't answer those questions correctly, then of course that's when you have to go to those different options, which is requesting it by phone or of course requesting it by letter. Now, just to keep in mind, sometimes those questions that they ask can be some trick questions. Like for instance, they may say, do you remember this license plate that you had 6 years ago? So they will ask that question. I'm just letting you know, so.
And a no answer is a valid answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes none of the options apply to you. And that's okay. And also, don't be afraid or feel like you're getting scammed if you don't pass those security questions. Mm-hmm. And then the option that they may say is you got to send something in to verify your identity. So they may ask you to send a copy of your driver's license, social security card. Don't be afraid of that. They'll have their actual address where you're going to be sending that information, or sometimes faxing it. And you also, on some of the sites, you can access a chat feature where in real time you can talk to a representative, and then they'll give you your upload link and you can upload those documents.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You all have any questions for us? No. Question. Yes.
When you request the annual credit report, do you have to pay extra of the score?
So when you request it online, you do have to pay for the score. Yeah, you do. You do. Yeah, there's a small fee that you would have to pay for that. But what I'll say is this about that, is that even if you don't start off with getting the score, I would say just looking at the report is just the most important thing, because if you go to, some of the different websites such as Credit Karma, it will at least kind of give you a baseline in terms of where you're at with your score, whether if you're good, fair, bad, or poor. It at least gives you an idea of where you're at. Okay.
Yeah, and if you go directly to the Bureau's website, they'll generally give you a score as well, like
Yeah.
initial, without having to pay for that. But yeah, so that's what, like, we always suggest start out with the free services, because it's gonna give you a good indication. It may be different by a few points, but those few points aren't going to, for instance, knock you out of those ranges with the categories where they say, good, fair, poor, excellent. It's not gonna move the meter enough where there's a difference where you may show as in the good range through, say, a Credit Karma, and then if you go directly to Trans, you're gonna get the score. It's gonna show you in a poor range. It's not gonna be that drastic. Yeah. So stick with the free options first.